There's only two ways. The way that doesn't work is epiphany. And I've talked about that since 2011. Give the whole company an epiphany or have an epiphany about exercise. You can't make that happen. The second way that works is you redesign the environment. And if you need to create a big change quickly, that's how you do it. You redesign the environment. You make the behaviors you want really, really easy to do by redesigning the environment. That's the built environment, the physical environment, the digital environment, the social environment, and the behaviors you don't want people to do, you make it harder to do.
Hello and welcome to Franklin Covey on Leadership. I'm your host, Will Hodelin. Today is a special New Year's resolution edition of the podcast in which we're going to talk to Dr. BJ Fogg about habit formation. Dr. Fogg is a behavioral scientist who has spent decades studying how individuals, teams, and organizations actually change behavior. He's the founder of Stanford's Behavior Design Lab, the creator of the Fogg Behavior Model, and the author of the New York Times bestselling book, Tiny Habits. In today's conversation, we'll walk through his model for behavior change. We'll talk about the habits that he's developing in his own life and the systems that he's implemented to ensure he's effectively building those habits and how you can bring his model of habit formation and behavior change to your organization. BJ Fogg, welcome to Franklin Covey on Leadership.
Well, hello. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Wonderful. I'm very excited for today's conversation. So we are recording shortly after the beginning of a new year when many people are working on resolutions. So let's start personal. What is your New Year's resolution?
Oh, I don't make traditional resolutions because I create habits throughout the year whenever I want. But a recent one, so I will answer the question. A recent one has to do with refining my morning routine. So I've added in dancing in the mornings. So dancing, it could just be a short dance, in the Tiny Habits way, something very tiny, but it usually goes on. So this morning I danced for about 15 minutes, followed by stretching and mobility work.
So let's use your personal habit formation as a way to explain the Tiny Habits methodology. How are you going about developing this new dancing habit?
Yeah, so the way Tiny Habits method works is you pick a new habit that you actually want, and you make it really tiny and small. So you pick a new habit that you actually want, and you make it very tiny and small. So in this case, all I have to do is dance a few bars, and if that's all I do, it's fine. But in the Tiny Habits way, you can do as much as you want or as little as you want, but you do something every day. And I know what it comes after. It comes after I get a big drink of water in the morning. Then I turn on some music, put in my ear pods, and I dance in the dark. And I know I can stop after just a few bars, but I almost never do because I like it. And the more my body wakes up, the more I'm like, yeah, this is pretty great. And so then that flows really quite naturally into getting down on the floor and doing a bunch of different stretching things. And then I really feel great about starting my day. So I've dialed that in. It's a little bit different than what I was doing a few months ago. But I did it today, I did it yesterday, and the day before. So I guess we could count that as a change for the new year.
As a new habit. Great. You've been studying habit formation, behavior design for decades now, working at Stanford and writing and researching on the topic. You've developed the Fogg Behavioral Model with the memorable acronym B equals MAP, M-A-P. Can you walk through what does B equal MAP mean? And then we'll kind of dive from there deeper into behavior change.
Yeah, so it is a model, not an equation, but it does have an equal sign. So B stands for behavior. And there are different types of behavior. One is a habit. So a habit is a type of behavior. And so a behavior happens when three things come together at the same time: motivation to do the behavior, or in this case, the habit, ability to do the behavior, and a prompt. And a prompt is something, I used to call it trigger, but I changed it a few years ago to be prompt, to be clearer and more distinct. And it's anything that reminds you. It's like the call to action. It's the reminder. So in the case of me dancing in the morning, my prompt to dance is after I take that big drink of water and put the glass down, then I turn to starting the music. So in the Tiny Habits way, what you do is you find an existing routine that you already do to prompt the new behavior, the new habit that you want. You don't use Post-its or alarms or just try to remember it. you don't leave the prompt to chance. You find an existing routine or habit you do, and you sequence it after. And it's a little bit of a design challenge, and I think it's fun. It's like, what does this come after? So for example, if I tried to dance after I showered in the evenings, that's probably not going to work because I have other things I'm doing. I'm preparing and winding down. So part of the tiny habits method is to deliberately design the habits, super tiny ones, into your existing routine. And then when you do the habit, you self-reinforce. And in tiny habits, we call that celebration. You allow yourself to feel successful, or you deliberately cause yourself to feel successful. Like, good for me, way to go. BJ, your day's going to be so much better, given that you're waking up and dancing and getting your brain going at this early time. So it's really those three things are innovations that I brought together in 2011 when I started teaching this. James Clear signed up for my course in 2012. And it's, number one, lower the bar for the habit, make it super tiny. And you can do as much or little as you want, but do something. Number two, sequence it after a routine you already do. I call that anchoring. James Clear renamed that habit stacking, same concept. And number three, you self-reinforce. You allow emotions, positive emotions to happen. And that's what wires in the habit.
You focus on tiny. You said that a couple of times, it needs to be a tiny habit, a tiny habit. Why tiny? Sometimes when I originally read Tiny Habits, probably a few years ago, I thought, are these habits too small to really motivate me? So
I'm so glad you asked the question. It was me so I developed the behavior model that I now call the Fogg Behavior Model in 2007. And it is a model that applies to all behaviors, including habits. And there's a graphical version of the model that I'm not going to show here, and it's kind of hard to describe. But I was looking at my own graphical model. It has a curved line on it. And what that shows is the harder a behavior is, the harder a habit is, the more motivation you need to do it. And as the behavior or the habit gets easier and easier, the less motivation you need. And so the insight I had looking at my own graphic of my own model was, oh, if I make the habits really easy to do, then I don't have to worry about motivation. Check, right? It's so simple. Floss one tooth, put on one drop of sunscreen, which was one of the first things I do. Take a sip of water, dance for a few bars. Doesn't require a lot of motivation. So then you only have to worry about then what is the prompt. And that's where that took a while for me to figure out. I gave a TED talk on all of this, like the anchoring technique in tiny habits. So in the Fogg behavior model, number one, the harder a behavior is, the more motivation you need to do the behavior. And the easier the behavior, the motivation can be high or low. A super simple behavior, you don't need lots of motivation. And because I grew up, like probably everybody listening or watching this, believing that you had to just keep yourself motivated to do something you don't want to do. And that was the key. And then I found, no, you can create habits quickly and easily. And it's not a motivation challenge. It's more of a design challenge. Where does this fit in my day? What's going to prompt? How do I make it really easy? And then again, you can do as much or as little as you want every day. If I only wanted to dance just a few bars, fine. But when you want to do more, you let yourself do more. So it's really about consistency than size of the habit.
If you have a habit that's very small, you sometimes might not feel a very positive feedback loop from it. So I've heard you use the one drop of sunscreen before, or floss a single tooth, or you just said earlier, dance for a few bars. If you're only doing one drop of sunscreen, you're still getting sunburn. Then you're like, is this habit even worth it? Yeah, maybe the action is tiny, but the impact is small too. So, in that motivation action prompt, what if the reward is not big enough to kind of sustain your interest in the habit over time?
It doesn't give you the benefit that you want. Well, look at it this way. Number one, the hardest thing for most things, so things that really you should be doing longer versions of, like physical activity, the hardest part is just starting. And so in the tiny habits method, and we have coaches that we train in the method and certify, and we train them deeply beyond what you can find in my book. And one of the things they're very good at is finding the starter step. So for any habit that really requires more time, you design the starter step to be the tiny habit. And in many cases, let's say walking, a typical starter step is put on your walking shoes. And I have so many people that have reported to me that, yeah, I was putting on my shoes. I had no intention of walking that day, but guess what? Once the shoes were on, I was out and walking. So one way to look at it is it gets you started on something bigger. The other way to look at it is, yeah, if I'm putting on a drop of sunscreen or more every day, with time, I'm probably going to do more and more sunscreen because it gets easier to do. And I'm like, the consistency seems to matter a lot more than the size. And in fact, when it comes to creating the habit, you don't have to create the big habit. Just have a placeholder where you do something and then do more when you want to. And over time, people seem to do more and more. And will do not just flossing one tooth, they'll floss all their teeth. Not just put on one drop of sunscreen, but put on the appropriate sunscreen you need for that day.
I want to move from talking about the individual to the organization. I'm sure many people right now are thinking about their own New Year's resolutions and how they can apply the MAP and the tiny habits psychology to formulation to their New Year's resolution and to whatever habit they're personally trying to develop. But we're a leadership company and we work with leaders on how they can get their organizations to improve. So how does this same Fogg behavior model apply at organizational level? I think you spend about 50% of your time now outside of Stanford working with organizations. So maybe talk about the organizational application of this behavioral model.
Oh, there's a lot of directions I can go with this, but let me start here. If you are looking at creating lasting change, either in your employees or work teams or customers, there are two overall principles. So yes, the Fogg behavior model matters. You need to know what is the behavior specifically, what motivates this behavior, how do we make it easy, and what's the prompt. And all winning products or services have figured that out. They tap into motivation. They don't add motivation later. They mostly tap into existing motivation. They make the behavior the company wants really easy to do, and there's a prompt for it. I have a method called behavior design, and this is what I mostly train industry innovators in. It's a step-by-step method that helps companies and other organizations develop products and services that actually work, that actually change behavior. And I won't go into those steps here. There's other ways you can learn them, other ways people can work with me. But I will give two really important principles here that apply both for changing our own lives, our spouses, our family, but also employees and customers. And I call them maxims. Number one, help people do what they already want to do. And number two, help people feel successful. So if you're looking at lasting change or engagement or habits that endure, I'm using those as rough synonyms, those are the two keys. Now, help people do what they already want to do implies you're not going to be very successful trying to get people to do stuff they don't want to do. And if it's a specific behavior maybe they don't want to do, but you can help them understand by doing this, taking this vitamin, you'll be able to achieve something you really care about, that's one way to do it. You help them do what they already want to do by making it easy for them to do. You help people do what they already want to do to make sure there's a prompt for it. And then the second one does map to the tiny habit celebration, help people feel successful. So for your employees or customers, help them feel successful and don't make them feel foolish or awkward or lame. People stop using products when that happens. And if you look at the most successful products in the market, they do those two things. They help people do what they already want to do. They help people feel successful. And I think that's the most helpful, shortish kind of answer I can give you, because do those two things, because when you do those two things, you have the opportunity to create engagement and lasting change. If you do the opposite of either one, it's going to fail, I guarantee you.
Breakthrough results start with simple habits. Franklin Covey's guide, Private Victories, enables you to build the foundation of personal leadership by mastering the essentials of effectiveness. Grab your free copy from the show notes to build the momentum and motivation to unleash sustainable success. I think those two are great maxims. I want to move from the philosophical to the practical. Is there a product that you have worked on that you can talk about that you think did a brilliant job applying those, or a product that today is very popular that you think you could explain kind of how those maxims come in real life?
Yeah, I can't talk directly about products that I've worked on for various reasons, but let's take AI. Let's take AI that you're using. Does it help you do what you already want to do? Check. Does it help you feel successful? Check. Maybe even too much, right? So it's doing those two things. Let's take maps. When you use whatever map version, does it help you do what you want to do? Yeah, get someplace efficiently. Does it help you feel successful? Yeah, when you take a wrong turn, it doesn't say, hey, you dummy, you went the wrong way. It just recalibrates and takes you there. The examples go on and on. Google, in the earliest days, when it was just a search box, did it help people do what they already want to do? Yeah. And then it also queued up ads that were relevant, that they wanted. That became the foundation of their revenue back then. And did it help people feel successful? Yeah, it brought a result back. So when you look at the history of even a huge company like Google, it really did those two things very well.
So speaking of AI, I think a lot of companies today are struggling with AI adoption, and they're thinking about how do we get our employees to use AI more effectively? That is a big behavior change at scale problem. How do you get hundreds of people inside of a company to all behave differently? How would you apply the Fogg behavioral model to a organizational change phenomenon like that?
Yeah, this is actually a familiar topic because I did work with a big company last year on this. And the training for them was hours long, not just a few minutes. So I'll try to be brief here. This organization really didn't care that much about how their employees used AI. In this case, it was Microsoft Copilot. They just wanted them to start using it and get better. Okay, so using AI is not a specific behavior. It's an abstraction. It's like an abstract thing. And there are dozens of ways that an employee can use Microsoft Copilot, right? And so the challenge and the opportunity is for them to help each employee identify which of these 50 ways that I could use AI in my work do I actually want to do and will help me. I call that behavior matching. And behavior matching is super important in the health domain. You know, which exercises do I want to do and can do? Which foods do I want to eat and can eat? Same thing with getting AI adoption. Which of all these different ways I could be using AI are the right ones for me? The mistake, and I'll switch a little bit to the health domain. There were a lot of tech companies in Silicon Valley that were trying to get all their employees to meditate. You know, and they're forcing meditation on people. And that's not the right stress reduction behavior for everybody. There's dozens of ways to reduce stress. A better approach is to help people match themselves with a specific behavior or habit that helps them reduce stress, whether that's gardening, walking, being in nature, playing with the dog, and so on. And they were making the mistake of saying you must meditate. So I would look at this AI adoption challenge in the same way. How do we help our employees match themselves with the ways they want to use Microsoft Copilot or some other AI system? And then trust in time that as they start using for this, they'll find other ways, and then it will be a more complete or richer use of the AI tools the company has invested in.
That makes sense. I like that idea a lot of behavior matching and this ties back to the maxim you had earlier of help people do the things they already want to do. So that makes a lot of sense. So I want to talk now about kind of change management inside of organizations, which is an area that you've worked on and thought about a lot over time. I want to play a quick game called Love It, Leave It, or Modify It. And I'm going to give you a few change management maxims or sayings that you hear often. And I want you to share, do you love this saying? Do you think we should leave it behind, or how would you modify it?
Got it.
So the first one is people need to understand the why before they'll change.
Modify it. I wanted to say love it. You can get people to do specific behaviors and they may not understand the overall picture for the company if they already want to do it. Like take walking, when you take walking break meetings, go walking with a friend, and like, great, that sounds great. They may not understand the company's reason for that, and that's okay. So I'd modify it, but helping people know there's an overall purpose, a meaningful thing for why you're doing these walking breaks with colleagues is helpful.
Next one, big change requires bold moves.
I'm going to say, love it. Probably to people's surprise.
Yeah, it's my surprise.
Here's the surprise. There are two ways to achieve big change. One is do essentially the tiny habits method. Do small changes, and those will accumulate over time or they will grow. That takes time. Okay, so you can't get to big change through the tiny habits method or incremental change, but it takes time. The other way, there's only two ways. The way that doesn't work is epiphany. And I've talked about that since 2011. Give the whole company an epiphany or have an epiphany about exercise. You can't make that happen. The second way that works is you redesign the environment. And if you need to create a big change quickly, that's how you do it. You redesign the environment. You make the behaviors you want really, really easy to do by redesigning the environment. That's the built environment, the physical environment, the digital environment, the social environment, and the behaviors you don't want people to do, you make it harder to do. So really what you're looking at is an incremental change method like tiny habits, baby steps if you want to rewind, plus changing the environment, and they work together. So that's why I'm going to say love it, because when I hear big change, they probably want it done quickly. So you do need to think about how do we redesign the environment or the context so the behaviors we want happen, and the behaviors we don't want will not happen or be less likely.
Next one is culture eats strategy for breakfast.
I'm going to leave it because I'm not an expert on, those are big words, culture and strategy.
Okay, so you're going to avoid it.
I'm going to avoid it because they would have to be defined. And then even then, there's other people that are way more expert than I am on both of them.
All good. All right, motivation is the key to sustained performance.
No. I think it is. It's related, but it's helping people feel successful in a way that matters to them. So, and that does create motivation, but it's not the same thing as, an incentive program or threatening people or saying you're going to lose your job. There's a bunch of ways to motivate. Instead, when people do the behavior you want them to do, help them feel successful in a way that matters to them.
And what's your suggestion on figuring that out? I mean, is it just simple, just ask everybody what the motivation, what the successful reward will be for them?
Yeah, it can be that, but there is a framework to understand, and I have a framework in the back of the Tiny Habits book, that there are 32 different ways to help somebody feel successful. And one of the rows is about competition. Some people are really motivated and they feel like, oh, if I won or if I did. One's about cooperation. Okay. So fortunately, the person I work with very, very closely every day, she's all about achieving in cooperative ways. I'm more of a competitive person, but I'm very grateful I'm working with somebody who values that we together achieve this. And then, anyway, people should check it out in the back of my book, but it's about one. So there is a framework to think through. Now I'm going to shift gears and give you some general human nature ones. Everybody wants to feel valued in their communities. They want status and they don't want to lose status. Everybody wants to avoid pain. Everybody wants their children to succeed in the real world. Everybody wants to, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people want to work on something that will make the world a better place. So you have these general things that, and then certainly you can ask people. So basically I gave you three answers. One, there is a framework of 32 different ways to message success. Next, you have these general human desires or aspirations. And third, you can simply just ask people.
Yeah, awesome. All right, final love it, leave it, or modify it for you. Consistency is the secret to habit formation.
No, that's absolutely wrong. The secret to habit formation is the emotion you feel. Okay, so I'm big on consistency. I've talked about that. But it's not consistency or repetition that creates the habit. That's completely wrong. What it is, it's the emotion that somebody feels. So yes, design for consistency, that absolutely matters. But if you're talking about habit formation, and that was the question, what forms the habit is the emotion that somebody feels when they do a behavior. Quick example. Here's this pen. Let's say I use this pen for the first time, this purple pen, and it writes beautifully. And it's easy to do. And I get this like, oh my gosh, this pen is giving me a superpower. If that emotion, that sense of it's giving me a superpower is strong enough, guess what? The next time I reach for pens, I'm not reaching here. I'm reaching right for this one. So this is a one and done because I had this feeling of success, this emotion. And so that's really what you're designing for when you're designing for habits in yourself or other people, is help them feel successful in a way that matters to them, and especially on the first time.
Wonderful. I want to now kind of position your work on habit formation and change management within the broader literature on the topic. You mentioned earlier James Clear. So, Atomic Habits is also a very popular book. We had an Impact conference last year. James Clear spoke at our conference. How would you say Tiny Habits differs from or connects to Atomic Habits? And I'll ask the same about Power of Habit as well next.
Yeah. Well, I developed the Tiny Habits method in 2010. I started teaching a free 5-day program in 2011. Hundreds of people a week doing data collecting at the end. James Clear signed up for my program in 2012. When he signed up, his career was entrepreneur. I went back and looked at the files that I have. He was an entrepreneur. So he took my free 5-day course in Tiny Habits. He emailed me later. He was really excited about habits. James is a terrific entrepreneur. He's a terrific marketer. But did he do deep research on habits? Did he coach 60,000 people in habits like I did? Probably not. So he's got a great book. He's very good at finding quotable quotes, way better than I am. But I am the
research guru.
The research and the innovator, basically. But to give him credit for how he's able to distill things and communicate and market those things, that's huge.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more in the Tiny Habits method that is not represented in Atomic Habits. So some people think, I read Atomic Habits, I don't need to read Tiny Habits. Atomic Habits is a good start. But if you really want to understand deeply how habits work, you need to read Tiny Habits.
Yeah. And then what about The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg? Where would you say your philosophy differs or doesn't?
What's so great about Duhigg's book, Power of Habit, is it caused the word habit to become more positive. Back when he published that book, I was working with Weight Watchers back in the day when they had a CEO I really liked. And habit was kind of a dirty word. It mostly meant bad habits, and so they used the word routine. I think what Duhigg's book did was it made habits more positive. Now, my agent's going to be so mad. I don't think it gives practical guidance on how to actually create habits. And the habit loop, I do not believe is a loop. You see that all the time. The habit loop, it's not a loop, it's a sequence. And that sequence goes back to 1955 in a book that I actually have an original copy of. So the components matter, but it's not a loop. I've not really gone, this is probably the first time I've said it in a forum like this. And does it matter that it's not a loop and it's just a sequence? Maybe not. But you won't see that graphic in Tiny Habits because I think it's inaccurate. And when I see somebody using that, it's like, not quite right. But to the book's credit and to Duhigg's credit, he helped people start thinking about habits as a good, positive thing and thinking more specifically. So that book really opened the doors for other things.
And then the final one is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the Franklin Covey original. So how do you feel like it compares or does it?
Well, Stephen Covey and I come from the same culture, the same background. In fact, we've met a few times, and there's other connections there. Huge fan of the book. His 7 habits, I would not consider habits. I would consider them general habits or generalizations, like sharpen the saw. That's a generalization.
A paradigm or a principle or a mindset.
Whereas when I think of habit, it's something very specific. It's like you could put it in a movie script and somebody would know exactly what to do. It needs to be that specific. Now, I've had some interactions with, I won't name names, a huge consulting firm. They wanted to do this thing around habits, and what they were putting out there were not habits. It was these generalizations. And I said, no, these aren't habits. These are, maybe we call it general habits or general themes. And they weren't willing to budge on that. And I was not willing to be part of a project that was calling something habits that wasn't. So we parted ways. Stephen Covey's book has been huge in my life because I grew up reading it, my parents and so on. And I think it's just a little semantic quibble I have about what we call habits and what we don't. But I think his book has made a huge contribution.
Absolutely. No, seminal work for sure. Before we close, I want to switch gears actually a little bit away from habits, which is talking about the risks of technology. So back in 2006, you gave testimony to the FTC about the fears around persuasive computers. We now have entered an era with AI. We have super persuasive supercomputers. And so I'm curious, how do you think about the current technology moment? Like if the FTC were to call you back and say, hey, it's been 20 years since we heard from you. What's your warning right now? What would you say?
Well, I probably wouldn't say this, but I would think, why didn't you do anything? I warned you 20 years about this in a formal testimony, but there were no follow-up questions and no follow-up interactions at all. And what would I say now? I'd say, the same things apply. In my testimony 20 years ago, I talked about deep fakes. I didn't call them deep fakes because there wasn't a name, but videos. Anything that's on a screen, any video, you can no longer trust. Wow, I called it 20 years ago and said, this is going to be a problem. I think we're just now seeing more and more how problematic that's going to be. I would probably prioritize that as number one right now, the problem with deep fakes and how people can actually.
How would you suggest solving deepfake videos?
I don't know. I wish I knew. I wish 20 years ago somebody had been thinking like, yes, this is coming and how do we do it? I don't know. I'm not that smart in that area, but to imagine that anything you see on the screen, whether it's a FaceTime call or something on social media or something you watch on broadcast, could be completely fake and being done en masse. That's freaky. Okay. So I would just say, that's the number one problem right now because the potential for global disruption is massive. I hate to be so negative because in my work, it's like, what are the positive uses of technology?
Yeah. So let's end on that one.
That's the pretty positive.
What are you most excited about with AI right now? Or technology generally, but either AI or technology broadly, what has you most excited today?
FaceTime, Zoom with friends and family. I mean, there are other positive uses, but given how hard the year was, given that my dad passed away a couple months ago and so on, I love the ability to connect with my mom and my siblings through phone, through FaceTime, through Zoom. So that's the thing I'm excited about.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry to hear about your dad passing. So to close, we ask the same question to every guest. We're a leadership company. Who is a leader that has greatly influenced you, and what lessons can we all learn from them?
Wow. I'm thinking Jane Goodall. She also passed away this year. I was fortunate enough to be at a TED Talk where she passed around her little monkey thing, Mr. H, and I touched it, and I felt like I got a little magical power from that. She was bold. She was brave. She worked hard. She was inspiring. She just was amazing. So that would be a person I would pick today that really inspires me.
That's wonderful. And as small as you said, talked about Zoom beforehand. Many moons ago, I worked at Google and I was working on Hangouts, and we did a Google Hangout with Jane Goodall. And I had the fortune of doing tech customer service support trying to help her show her how to use Google Hangouts on her computer. So that connects as a strange connection with your final two answers. But wonderful. Thank you so much for joining for today, for sharing about habits, about how we can all implement tiny habits in our own lives, about how as organizational leaders, we can think about implementing those maxims inside of our organization to drive behavioral change, to build products that really change behavior as well. So I deeply appreciate it and deeply appreciate the kind of contribution you've made to the field that we're in about trying to help people live better lives. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your great questions. It was really fun talking to you.
Wonderful. And to everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Good luck with your New Year's resolutions. Good luck implementing habits in your own life, positive habits in your own life. And we hope you join us next week for another episode of On Leadership.